Hey guys, it's everyone's favourite local TRAPTRIX player here, and today I'll be presenting the deck I took to YCS Sydney, where I finished 107th out of 1,100 registered players, and what was also my first ever YCS. Can you guess which deck I took? It's only been my favourite for 5 years, and anyone from Perth would know it's TRAPTRIX if it isn't already obvious. But yeah, it's my favourite deck, so I figured I would take it to my first ever YCS. Anyway, overall, I'm pleased with my deck's performance, garnering 6 wins, 3 losses and a draw against a field that included Snake Eyes, Floo, Sky Striker, Mekk-Knight, Horus and a mirror match before the conclusion of the 2 days. Clearly I didn't top, but I had a great time between piloting my TRAPTRIX and entertaining Jules, watching finals, and just doing everything Yu-Gi-Oh! Got a few nice cards on the side through trades or shopping, and I do intend to go back next year. So, sorry Perth, you're stuck with me trap-holing your summons until next year. Anyway, that's enough about me. I'd say it's time to move on to the deck. Starting off with monsters, we have 3 Mamelio, 3 Mantis, and 2 Pudica. You want to see these in your opening hand? They're the heart and soul of TRAPTRIX. You normal summon them, and you either get a search, or you bait out a negate, and then you link off into Sarah and play. Simple as that. Reason I went with 2 Pudica and 2 Garden instead of the usual 3 and 1 is because I don't like opening both a Pudica and a Garden. Plus I figure having more chances to hard open Garden is better going second, but I'll talk a bit more about that later. But yeah, always max out on those 2, and then the choice of Garden and Pudica is up to you. After that, we have 2 Diana. It's Recovery in a top deck war or grind game, or you can combo it with Sarah. Sarah to get a trap back. And then we have 2 copies of Arachna Camper. Search it off of Mantis Mantis for combo plays into Sarah to set Holotail, or use it as back row protection. Either way, it's handy. Quite a good extender. It's effectively a archetype hand trap. Speaking of hand traps, we have 3 copies of Shifter. You resolve this against the current metagame. High chance you're going to win. Win ends the turn of Snake Eyes and Fire King, and any other deck relying on the graveyard depending on their hand. Just good card to have, and it doesn't affect me that much. At most, it'll turn off my Dionea and Haltier for a turn, but even that's not a big deal. Moving on, we have 2 copies of Ghost Bell and 2 copies of Ghost Mourner. You're probably wondering why I'm running this instead of Ash or Veiler. Answer is Crossout Designator. It was everywhere at Vegas, common in locals, and I just didn't want to deal with it. Running this rendered that dead. These 2 pretty much fill the same role as Ash and Veiler anyway. I hit Flamberge, I hit stuff in the grave, I do a bit of burn damage. All in all, pretty happy with my choice. Rounding out my monsters is Kashtira Fenrir, a card I'm very happy I invested in, especially against Snake Eyes. Forced 50-50s in my favour, got me discard fodder for Super Poly, got me a body on board to banish for Garden, and whether I went first or second, it was just an all-round great card for forcing interactions in my favour. On to spells, we have 2 copies of Garden. As mentioned earlier, I run 2 copies of this as opposed to the normal 3 Pudica 1 Garden. Hard opening is very handy, especially going second, because if your first summon is negated or stopped, it lets you play through by summoning another monster or by banishing something. Also works well with Fenrir, so good card, definitely recommend 2. We then have a card that'll surprise a lot of people, unless you're from Perth. Super Polymerization. I've been running this in TRAPTRIX since 2019. Won't always break a board, but it'll crack it and simplify the game state, and that is often enough, especially if you also open up a garden or you can get a Haltier into the grave. Speaking of which, this can discard a Haltier into the grave. Good card all round, and even if you hard draw it, you can just set it. And then finally, one copy of Called by the Grave. I didn't see it on the day, unfortunately, but it's a good card. Sure, if you resolve it against Snake Eyes, I'd assume it'd win you the game, but I didn't see it, so probably gets cut. And yeah, moving on to trap cards, we first off have 3 Haltier. Good first or second. It's a starter, extender, recovery. Recovery, nets advantage via Sarah. Always run free. And it combos surprisingly well with Typhon. And before you call me a nut job, say you've had a bit of back and forth with your opponent and you've exhausted all your options. As long as you have a copy in your grave, say all you have left on board is Sarah, you can then go into Typhon, get over what you need to, bounce something back, and during your opponent's turn, banish the Holotayer and then revive Sarah or any other TRAPTRIX monster. Pretty good, I say. So just a little trick there for TRAPTRIX players if you haven't considered it. 2 copies of Floodgate Trap Hole. Good generic against most summons. The only thing it doesn't stop is links, but you hit whatever they summon before they reach that point. Surprisingly good against Snake Eyes. Hit the Poplar or hit the Ash and they're forced to play other ways. Locks up zones. Just all-round good trap hole card. Probably the most important trap hole, though, in my opinion, is Gravediggers. Stops hand traps, stops Poplar and Snake Eyes in the graveyard, stops Ray if they play Silly. Silly, just an all-round good card, combos well with Mourner. In my opinion, 2's a good number. We have 1 Banishing Trap Hole. It's another trap hole name. Good against Fire King and Snake Eyes. You hit their first summon, banish it face down. Not much else to say. It's a Metacore. I could run Bottomless, but at the moment, because Fire King destroys, it just triggers effects, so arguably this is better, and it served me well on the day. Then we have 3 copies of Shade Brigandine over Parallel Exceed. Exceed's a good card, don't get me wrong, but gets weaker the longer a game goes on. This is a better top deck. It's basically another extender, it's another Sarah trigger, and it's another path to Time Thief Redoer. In worst case scenario, as long as I've got a Sarah on board, I can always use that in the opponent's turn to get a Pudica or a Mamelio for a Disrupt. Rounding out the deck, we have 3 Infinite Impermanence. Not much else to say, it's Infinite Impermanence, good first or second, and in TRAPTRIX's case, it just so happens to be another Sarah trigger. Now, the extra deck. Starting with my favourite card in Yu-Gi-Oh! 2 Sarah instead of 3. Yes, she's our most important card, but the thirds never come up for me. Extra deck's tight, and between Alamaris, Haltier, Garden, and Reborn back when I ran it, there's plenty of ways to revive her should I need it. Also, we're TRAPTRIX, so protecting her is easy. Unless you're running Extrav, I just don't see the need for 3. Regardless, the game plan remains the same. Get Sarah on board, activate traps, and snowball. We then have 1 copy of Adipus. It's basically access code for the deck, but easier to summon. Pop a card, negate a few others, win the game. We then have 1 copy of Rafflesia. It's Rafflesia, I don't really need to say much. Just with Haltier, it also gives targeting protection if you summon it on the opponent's turn. 1 Pingula. If for some reason your first summon gets negated, but you've got Garden, you can climb via Pingula into Sarah, get Arachnacamper, and then do a Sarah Arachnacamper into Haltier combo if you want to go that route. Plus, a nice, neat little thing against Fire King. If you take away one of the cards that they banish or send over the graveyard by themselves, you make yourself immune to their effects, and they're forced to battle over you, which means playing into your trap cards. My final TRAPTRIX monster is Alamaris. Kind of underrated. She's good first or second. She's Revival, a Sarah Trigger, Extender, and Advantage Generator in one card. Not to mention she has a cute combo with Pudika if summoned with 3 materials. Plus, as you'll see shortly, she combos well with Link 2s. And now we have our Super Poly targets. This is Garura, Mud Dragon. Don't really need to say much on those. They just hit most generic targets. Earth Golem, I ran because I hate Menandium. It's mostly to deal with IP and Appaloosa. But that didn't come up, so the card was dead most of the day. Probably would have been better off running Gearfried or maining Abyss Dweller, but as I said, that was a metacore, so that's probably going to get dropped. But these two serve their purpose well. And now we move on to our generic links. First off, we have 1 copy of Nightmare Phoenix and 1 copy of Nightmare Cerberus. I don't own SP Little Knight, but these two are still good cards. They've got arrow synergy with Sarah. And remember when I said synergy with Alamaris? Well, basically, you summon Alamaris, do your revive, get advantage off of whatever you summon or Sarah interactions, then link off this and the card you summoned off for one of these for further advantage. So it's really good going second, and it makes Alamaris that much more deadlier. Plus, this also gives Sarah protection from effects. We then have 1 copy of IP Masquerena, just another generic link too. To say your opponent uses D-Barrier and cause XYZ, it just gives you another option. Combos well with the 2 aforementioned Nightmare cards, or the card that I'm about to show you now, Underworld Goddess. This can aim up 4 times over the course of the event, 3 times against Snake Eyes, once against Mekk-Knight, and each time it resolved, I won the game. Against Snake Eyes, I would wait till they used up their interactions, summon this, link off using their Flamberge, and then negate their Flamberge. Then they were pretty much stuck and couldn't recover their way out of it. Really solid card, and I would recommend running this if you've got room in your extra deck. And against Mekk-Knight, I summoned it off via IP. So, hard to kill. And rounding out the deck is 1 copy of Time Fee Freedoer. It's basically an honorary TRAPTRIX monster at this point, and I've got 6 trap cards that act as bodies, so easy removal. 1 game I summoned it with Shade and Haltier under it. Pretty funny, really. And then my last extra deck card is Typhon. Summoned it 7 times over the course of the day, and it's just phenomenally good card in the metagame right now. Now, you've already seen the Haltier interaction. Just gives you more options. Goes well with Super Poly too. So break your opponent's board, then summon this on top of the card you summoned and crack it further. And it stops Nibiru because nothing above 3,000 attack can activate their effect. And that's the extra deck. Finishing up with the side deck, we have 3 copies of Droll. It's just that sort of metagame at the moment. You own Droll, you run Droll, either main or side. Not going to go on about it. 3 copies of Nibiru. It's a way to get past Branded and Snake Eyes without triggering destruction effects. Plus, if I've got Garden on the board, I can then summon one of my TRAPTRIX monsters engraved. Just a really good card in general. 3 copies of Anti-Spell Fragrance. Apologies to the Mekk-Knight player in round 2 who opened up 5 spells, but yeah. I flicked this on him and he had no answer, but it's protection for my back row. It delays Snake Eyes plays. Not much else I can say on it. 3 copies of Cyclone. Just hits stun. So it hits Fire King spells. 2 copies of Triple Tactics Talent. Probably a dead card. I drew it 3 times and each time it didn't resolve for me. Not saying it's a bad card, but the opponents either read me like a book or by the time I drew it, the game was already over. So I'll probably swap that out to something a little more generic next time. And the last card is Abyss Dweller. This came up 3 times, won me 2 games. Still didn't help me in the 3rd game, but that was because I was versing a really good Snake Eyes player who knew how to bait me into nib. But it's Abyss Dweller, I don't really need to explain much, and that's the deck. With that, my first ever YCS experience has come to an end. Shout outs to Joshua Hull and Callum Newton, 2 awesome guys from Perth Pro Players. You gave great advice and reached top 32. Congrats. Also, thank you to the TRAPTRIX Orchard Discord, Yu-Gi-Oh! Edition Singapore, and my team, Team Sparkles, for all the varying help, be it deck testing, keeping me meta updated, card acquisition, or just general discussion. I enjoyed all of it, and personal shout out to Flygon727 for the post-YCS duel. Hopefully one of us can top 32 next time. Finally, big thanks to my mates from Tassie for coming over to watch. Had a great time hanging out, and hopefully we can do it again next year. I hope you had fun and enjoyed this video. Should circumstances allow, I'll be back next year. And if you enjoyed it, build yourself TRAPTRIX, or at least get out there and duel. Have fun, and see you in 2025.